Welcome to PEG's Fireside Chats with Candidates. And this evening, we're lucky to have Council Member Mark Levine, who's running for Borough President, for Manhattan Borough President. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much, Joyce. It's great to be here.
He started his career actually as a bilingual math and science teacher in a middle school in the South Bronx. And then he went on to found a neighborhood trust credit union, and they loaned over $25 million to families and small businesses in the north part of Manhattan. He is currently the chair for City Council's Health Committee, dealing with the pandemic issues. So thank you so much for your service to Manhattanites and everyone in that regard. And previous to that, Mark was on the City Parks Committee. Mark has a bachelor's degree from Haverford College and a master's degree in public policy from Harvard. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And to start, can you tell us a bit about what got you into politics?
Well, thank you so much, Joyce and Ellen. Great to see all of you, Marty, and I see we've been joined by Lorraine as well. I'm really pleased to have a chance to talk to you about the challenges facing the borough of Manhattan more broadly, and specifically the challenges facing Roosevelt Island tonight. And we'll touch on some of the themes that you mentioned in talking about my background. I did found a community development credit union. I hope we have a chance to talk about the lack of banking services on Roosevelt Island and some of the ideas I have for solutions there. I am a former public school teacher, and so I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about education, among other themes. And of course, chairing the health committee now, we're going to have to talk about the latest on vaccination and the pandemic and more. And my run for borough president really, and my political career, emerges out of my early years of activism in the classroom, founding a nonprofit in Washington Heights, also running a citywide after-school nonprofit. And I became very frustrated with government in its work managing our public schools. I became frustrated with the failure of local government to address community economic development, and ultimately decided that as much as I profoundly believe in the nonprofit sector to make real systemic change, you need public policy, you need government action, and that's what led me to run. Now I'm really honored to have been elected twice in the incredibly diverse 7th Council District, which includes the west side of Manhattan, starting at 96th Street, up through Morningside Heights, West Harlem, and into Washington Heights, where I live with my family, my wife and our 2 boys, both public school kids, not really kids anymore. One's in high school, and one's now in college at CUNY. As for priorities, I'll mention first my continued focus on public health, not just navigating beyond this crisis, a crisis which is not over despite our enormous progress on vaccination. This is going to be a challenge for New York City well into 2022 as we continue to vaccinate and to beat back the threat of variants and other challenges. But more importantly, we have a years-long fight ahead of us to address the underlying inequalities in healthcare that have been dramatically revealed and exacerbated over the past year in a way that can't be ignored. And Ellen and I first connected actually through activism on behalf of single-payer healthcare. And it's been so painful to see the impact in New York City of the fact that hundreds of thousands of people still do not have health insurance, lacking primary care, lacking things like an annual physical, and how it contributed to the underlying conditions which later led to people being so vulnerable to COVID. This needs to be our moment to finally achieve single-payer healthcare, to achieve universal healthcare for all people in the city, regardless of documentation status, and also to do things like adequately fund our public hospitals, attack what are still documented levels of racism in the way medical care is delivered, and to do things like improve access to healthy food in communities of color where it's still not accessible enough or affordable enough. This is going to be a major priority for me. I will be a public health warrior for the rest of my life, and certainly as borough president. Secondly, it's focusing on affordable housing and tenants' rights. In the midst of what really can only be called an emergency and lack of affordable housing, even coming out of this pandemic, we're going to have to double down on investment of creation of truly affordable housing, 100% affordable housing of the type that allows so many of you to make a home on Roosevelt Island. We need another era of major building of this kind of deeply affordable, 100% affordable housing. And that's going to require an expanded capital budget in our housing preservation department, something I'm committed to fighting for. But we also need to preserve the rights of tenants who currently do have housing but may be vulnerable. And I'm really proud to have achieved something big in my time in the council. In 2017, passing a law making New York City the first place in America to establish right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in housing court. This has really been a game changer in New York City, and it's set off a national movement. Now, I believe at last count, 8 cities have followed New York's lead. And just about a week ago, the entire state of Washington now has adopted right to counsel statewide. Most importantly, in the city, it's lowered the eviction rate by 40% pre-pandemic. But it has the policy has had a 5-year phase-in. And with the pending end of the moratorium on evictions, but which does only postpone what is the potential for really an avalanche of evictions. We want to take right to counsel immediately to every zip code in the city and do away with the 5-year implementation. And I'm absolutely elated that Thursday of last week, the city council passed my bill to immediately implement right to counsel in every zip code, including on Roosevelt Island, so that if, heaven forbid, any of you or your neighbors should face an eviction, you or they will have an attorney, if you need it, provided to you by a legal aid nonprofit funded by the city. It's really just hugely impactful for the tenants who are caught up in housing court, and I couldn't be more thrilled with it. I guess I'll say the third priority, if I can maybe mash two together, would be small business and arts institutions, both of which have been pummeled by this pandemic, and both of which we desperately need to come back. It was tough to run a small business pre-pandemic, including on Roosevelt Island, and it's been really an existential threat this pandemic has posed to them. And we've lost thousands of small businesses, and many more are vulnerable. Now, as we begin to reopen, thankfully, and get beyond the worst of the pandemic, there is hope on the horizon. But we still need a lot of assistance. We need rent relief. We need really to renegotiate leases down to affordable rents. They were unaffordable pre-pandemic, and now even more so. We need to get access to capital so that small businesses who need to borrow can grow and invest and expand. This also connects to our discussion on banking services on Roosevelt Island. And we need to reduce the impact of fines and fees, which have too often been driven by the city's goal to raise more money, when really they should be about just protecting the health and safety of residents. And if you can do that without levying the fine or the fee, that's a win for the business and a win for health and safety. And just a word on arts. I know I've gone on long, but there's so much to talk about. We've got to bring the arts back for New York City. It's not just for our heart and soul, but also for our economy and the thousands of jobs that are on the line. And so I put forward an arts plan that will bring back the arts strong in a safe way in the post-COVID world, supporting workers, the good union jobs in this sector, and really diversifying arts by expanding funding for nonprofits in communities of color and more. So these are some of my top agenda items and some of what I hope to focus on as your next Manhattan Borough President. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Can you tell us what your ideas are for banking on Roosevelt Island?
Well, I'm very concerned about the lack of in-person banking on Roosevelt Island. That's really unacceptable. I will work with you to interface with established banking institutions. I understand that that work has been challenging until now, and that even the offers of deposits from Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation have not been sufficient to entice them. But I will say that let's look long-term at creating a new institution. And one of the planks in my policy platform is creation of a city-run public bank, the first municipally owned bank in the city. Not the first public bank in America, because the state of North Dakota has had a public bank for 100 years. But this is an idea which is gaining traction. The city has an enormous amount on deposit on any given day, billions in commercial banks. What if we took some piece of that and put it into a bank that the public controlled, that had driven nothing by a mission to serve the people of the city? And it could also fill in the gap for retail banking in neighborhoods, which have become banking deserts, as unfortunately Roosevelt is the case in Roosevelt Island. But I also want to put on the table the idea of doing what we did in Uptown Manhattan, which is creating a new credit union, a community credit union for Roosevelt Island that would be cooperatively owned. And so all of you as residents and shareholders would have control over the policies of the institution. You wouldn't have to worry about it pulling up the stakes and moving away, because you'd be in control. And I think in a lot of ways, Roosevelt Island is an extremely good candidate for chartering a community credit union, which I can talk further about if you'd like. But first, the National Credit Union Administration looks for very clearly defined fields of membership, and to open your field of membership to those who live or work on the island, or study, perhaps you could add, is a very clear field of membership. Secondly, they often look for a sponsor with resources that can do things like help secure space and other assets in the early years. And the Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation could play such a role. So this is something that would probably would warrant a separate conversation, but I would love to help you do this, to use my expertise and to plug you into the world of community credit unions, many of which are located here in the city, and could help you incubate and develop what I think could be a really empowering solution for Roosevelt Island. I'm very happy to see that Lorraine and Kimberly are here. And if either of you would love to ask questions, I'd love to hear what's on your mind, and what can we do to fight for Roosevelt Island?
Okay. Yes, I guess some of my questions are about what can you do in regards to, like I said, I came on the call late, so I don't know if you had anything with regard to affordable housing and such.
Yeah. Well, we touched on it briefly, but this is a major concern for me. There's a desperate shortage of affordable housing, and the pandemic has not solved that problem. And so I want to push forward a really aggressive plan. In fact, my goal is to double the capital budget in the city's housing plan. Currently, HPD, which is our city's housing agency, has a $3.5 billion capital budget in a 5-year plan. I want to double that. And that can allow to dramatically increase the creation of new 100% affordable housing, like Mitchell-Lama, which of course is what made Roosevelt Island the wonderful, diverse community that it is today. But we haven't had housing like that since really the 80s. And we need to bring it back. And it requires money, and that's why I want to expand the capital budget. And we have affordability problems at all levels. The best housing has various tiers. So there are families who are struggling with homelessness or are at risk of homelessness that are at very low income levels. We need affordable housing for them more, frankly. But there's also people who are working class, and maybe they're working as a nurse or a bus driver, and they should be able to live in Manhattan too. They should be able to live in Roosevelt Island too. And I also mentioned earlier about the need to preserve affordable housing and help tenants stay in their homes. And it's why I fought very hard for right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in housing court. But Kimberly, if you would like to mention a strategy you'd like me to fight for, or what your vision for affordable housing in Manhattan and Roosevelt Island is, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, one of the strategies or whatever is we're trying to like have like a moratorium on privatization of Mitchell-Lama co-ops, because a lot of Mitchell-Lama people are losing Mitchell-Lama co-ops and people can't find affordable places to live, specifically.
I 100% support you.
Particularly here in Rivercross, it went private.
Right.
And every year since we've been private, we have maintenance increases.
Right.
And also it's a very big detriment to people. And everybody says they're for affordable housing, but no one really does anything to either preserve or to increase Mitchell-Lama co-ops.
Right.
You know, yeah. And so that's why I don't think that they should continue on with these like privatizations, because the plans also only point out 1 year after you're going to privatize, and it's not realistic in terms of what people expect for expenses, you know?
Right. Okay. Did you want to weigh in on that, Lorraine?
My question is, there are so many candidates all coming and speaking about great work that they're going to do. Can you tell us why we should vote for you above any of the other candidates?
Well, I have a habit of not saying anything negative about any of the other folks running in the race. I will just talk about me and maybe what makes me unique.
Okay.
So first,
Absolutely.
First, I'm just incredibly proud of the diversity of my coalition that reflects the diversity of Manhattan. I've been endorsed by Congressmember Adriano Espaillat, former Congressmember Charles Rangel, Congressmember Nydia Velasquez. I am the Spanish speaker, fluent Spanish speaker of among the main candidates, the only Spanish speaker in the race. And I'm on Spanish language TV multiple times a day. I am incredibly proud of the diversity of labor support. Too many unions to mention, but DC 37, TWU, the transit workers, the nurses, UAW, and probably at this point, 8 or 9 other really important unions that represent the diversity of this city.
Why do they support you?
You say, why do they support me?
Why you?
Because I have fought for workers, and I think particularly in my role as health chair, I've centered the needs of essential workers. I think in some cases, like the nurses, it's because of my stance on healthcare more broadly and some of the work that you and I have done. And I've also been endorsed by incredibly important issue groups. New York's League of Conservation Voters endorsed me today because of my leadership on the environment. New Yorkers Voters for Animal Rights have endorsed me because of what I've done on animal rights as chair of the health committee. So it's a coalition that reflects the broad diversity of the borough, and I'm really proud of it, and I think it's quite unique.
Great.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have to go in 1 second, but Rita, since you were late, if you want to get the last question or tell me what's on your mind, we can give you the final word.
I don't want to repeat the conversation. I know Ellen and I know Joyce, so I will. And there's a recording.
Okay.
I was interested in hearing about the police
Response.
It's a big issue, and I know there are demonstration projects in Oregon and other places that have had really great success with that, and I think we shouldn't be inventing the wheel.
Look, we have had 17 people who died in encounters with police and mental health response since the beginning of the de Blasio administration. So we need to be smarter about this. And there are times where you have a mental health crisis where there is a threat to the safety of the individual or people around them. And in such cases, you really do need to have a law enforcement presence. But there's also other cases where you have a difficult mental health episode without violence. And the idea is that the city would allow for dispatch of special mental health response teams that would consist of 2 FDNY EMS workers, as well as 1 social worker. Each precinct would have 1 such team, and they would be on for, I guess, 2 8-hour shifts, so 16 hours a day. I presume they'd pick probably whatever the busiest hours of any 24-hour period are. What I haven't heard yet determined, which is I think key, is how do you know when to dispatch a team that would include a law enforcement personnel, and when do you dispatch one of these alternative response teams? Leaders of the EMS unions have spoken out in the past week or so and said, you know, in theory, this could be great, but we do want to make sure that the safety of the EMS personnel is addressed, and perfectly fair. And so let's figure this out and figure out the circumstances in which these teams will be dispatched, the extent to which police backup is available if needed, et cetera. So there's some questions to work out, but I think the broader goal is one that's absolutely worth pursuing, and that has been tried, by the way, in other parts of the country with real success. So
we should certainly try some demonstration projects in New York City in different neighborhoods and see. And
they have just started this at 3 precincts, none in Manhattan. And I think the mayor wanted to roll it out more rapidly to every precinct. There was a little pushback in saying, well, couldn't you have let the pilots play out a little bit more? But on the other hand, I think a lot of folks feel an urgency to have an alternative model.
Right.
And we have over 70 police precincts. And so I do support an effort to get this citywide, but with some of the justifiable concerns that Ellen's son, I think, brought up, and some of the labor leaders have. I just want to say this has been a wonderful conversation, and that I care a lot about Roosevelt Island in this campaign, and if I'm lucky enough to win as borough president. And I think I'm scheduled to come to Roosevelt Island this weekend.
You
I don't
are
know if,
on Saturday at 10 a.m. You'll be at the farmer's market.
Amazing. So maybe some of you could come out and we can exchange hellos in person. I've been fully vaccinated, so I'm even shaking people's hands if they want. But I've been there many, 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 many times over the years with my family, and for other reasons. My kids played basketball there. I just
one question, Mark.
Yes, Rita.
Are you supporting someone for mayor? Have you made a choice?
Not at the moment. Do you have a candidate?
I do. But I'm curious to know. I think Scott Stringer has been very effective, and I know he's had this problem that has just came up with a sexual harassment issue.
Right.
But I really think there needs to be some kind of a
society's going to have to come up with some sort of
something, because
to litigate
it's
these
crazy
things.
Like what you do at 25 and 30 and 15, unless it's criminal, shouldn't be something that stigmatizes you for the rest of your life. And I'm still smarting because of the congressman in whose name escapes me.
Anthony Weiner?
No. The congressman in the Midwest, the comic.
Oh, Al Franken. He now lives on the Upper West Side.
He was forced out of office, and he was such a fabulous congressman.
Yeah.
Well,
this
is a big topic, Rita, and kind of hard to address quickly. I'll just say that I think we all agree that allegations of this nature need to be taken very, very seriously, that no woman should be demonized for coming forward, and that, there probably does need to be a process to work through these things. It's particularly tough in the middle of a high stakes campaign. But for me, I will say these allegations are of enormous concern. But it seems that we're out of time at this point.
We'll be back on Wednesday evening. And remember that the elections take place on June 22nd. Your vote is your voice, and make sure we hear it loud and clear on June 22nd, folks.